So I made this work just after I moved to Los Angeles, and I was trying to get a handle on the very large, massive, expansive city, or rather the county, because the city just carries on indefinitely and sort of merges with San Diego and just kind of grooves on up into Central California and sort of never stops. And I was asked to participate in a mapping exhibition. It was being hosted by SCI-Arc, which is an architecture institution, and I had been working for a little while with this technique where I was using Cibachrome photographic technology to make photograms, and I headed out in my little car, and I had a Thomas guide, which was the map of the map book, the standard map book of Los Angeles at the time, and I went to map the entire extent of Los Angeles County. So I would take 4 pages, pinpoint the place where they met in the middle of the Thomas Guide pages, and I'd drive to that place, often in extraordinarily frustrating kind of gridlocked traffic for hours. It was a sort of a trial by fire introduction to the sort of massiveness and entangledness of the LA freeway system, and so I would drive to that site, and wherever that happened to be, I would take soil and plant samples from that site, and they often didn't even exist. Sometimes I'd find myself, say, in South Central Los Angeles in a sort of arid car park, scraping up bits of dust off the ground or whatever, because it was what it was. And then sometimes the environment was really fecund. Something that appealed to me was that underneath the facade that was the city, there was a lot of other life that is obviously invisible, bacterial and fungal life, and that if I used this kind of methodology to sort of enumerate that life and make it visible in what was a somewhat pseudo-scientific process, what I'd get would be an extraordinarily fecund, overwhelming, overbearing amount of microbial life in the places that had been irrigated a lot in Los Angeles. Whereas, so wherever there's money in Los Angeles, it's irrigated, and wherever there's no money, it's barren. And so you've got this kind of clean, crisp imagery, this kind of beautiful, minimalist imagery in all of those areas that were deprived, actually, of water. And you've got this kind of rotten gunk everywhere that was, in fact, irrigated. So there's this kind of inverse logic to the way that this piece kind of emerged on the page, if you like. So that's what I did. I went out to all of these different sites, and I travelled right up to CalArts, way at the northern end of the Simi Valley, and I went out to Zuma, I went out way past Azusa, I went down to Long Beach, and I went everywhere in between, and each of the quadrants of the piece represents, in this kind of strange, abstract, oddly precise but also diffuse way, what I found there. That's what it is. That's what the work actually is. So for me it's quite personal, because I actually know the sites quite well, and each of them triggers the site almost like a portrait of the site. There's Griffith Park, there's Venice Beach, there's Long Beach, but of course when you see them in the flesh, they're highly abstract. Were really the first works that I made photographically within what I would regard as my sort of mature practice, this kind of work, this body of work. And I had been making installations until that time. And I'd become very, very interested in the ways in which we inhabit space and mark space by inhabiting it. And at a certain point I had the epiphany that we're not the only things that inhabit space, that our space is full of other organisms, and I decided to actualise that. And I did that initially by installing actually live bacteria and fungi in space, or growing them there. So I would go out into the world. I was also working I was working on my Masters at the Auckland University School of Fine Arts at that point, and I would work in my cousin's PhD biology lab and they gave me access so I could use their autoclaves, and they gave me some training in isolating bacteria and fungi through through safe protocols, and they allowed me to access petri dishes and agar and all the rest of it, and isolation areas where I could work with UV lights. So all of that stuff is involved in the making of this kind of work. And what I'd do is I would initially install in either windows or the light boxes within the ceilings of exhibition spaces, or in watch glasses on the windows between the outside world and the exhibition space. I would install these agar fields. Not particularly safe work to do when you think about it, but I was essentially double glazing windows and fluorescent fixtures in the ceiling, things like that. And over the period of the exhibition, the microbial material would enumerate and grow and become apparent. And that was my way of thinking through time and presence in a space. But it became kind of boring to do that after a while. It became, there was an aspect to time that became redundant in it, for me personally as an artist. And I became much more interested in both the formal qualities of morphogenesis, which I was writing a thesis about at the time, and which is to say how complex form emerges from simple structures, and also I became much more interested in time and the way that time functions in relation to growth or change or shift or perception. So I wanted to freeze the process and look hard at it in a very particular way. And that's when I started working photographically with Cibachrome, because I was able to take these extraordinarily complex fields of material that were transparent and translate them into this completely frozen abstraction. And that's how the work became.